Professor Angela Gronenborn, it's a pleasure to have you here. Your research combines NMR and other techniques with biophysics, biochemistry, and chemistry. Why are these approaches necessary to solve biological problems?
I think it's very easy to understand why, because I usually use a metaphor. If you want to understand how a car works, it's not good enough to just take a picture of the car. You actually have to open the hood, you have to find out how the engine works, you have to know how the power from the engine via the transmission goes to get the wheels rolling. So if you would only be a photographer, you would have no idea how the car works. So you have to be a car mechanic, you have to know something about engineering, and then put everything together. And the same is true for all of the areas in the sciences. If you're a chemist, you seem to be, you get trained to look at atoms and molecules. If you're a biologist, you get trained to look at an organism. These are very different objects on a very different length scale. And there is not one methodology that you can use to interrogate these objects with the same depth. And you therefore have to combine these different methodologies. And I always use also something from the arts, right? In the arts, you can represent an object via music or via a painting or via a photograph. And it all focuses on different aspects, but it all represents the same object. And it's when you do this, you can integrate what a different methodology gives you and then get a backed up picture, because we cannot understand the world just with a very narrow perspective. We have to have different perspectives to bring it together. And that's the same with the sciences.
Okay. Your group has solved the structure of a large number of medically and biologically important proteins. Did any of them provide insights for therapeutic approaches or applications, better saying?
Yes, indeed. And one of the proteins I talked about, cellular N, was actually developed into an anti-HIV agent because it binds to the major surface glycoprotein of the virus and clumps the virus together and thereby inhibits it. And certainly for the HIV reverse transcriptase, now knowing that we need to rigidify this binding site where the non-nucleoside inhibitors bind is very important for the people who design drugs against reverse transcriptase. I'm myself not in the field of drug development. I like to put my results out there for other people to use them.
Sure. What are your scientific goals currently?
It's in terms of methodology, I really would like to push the fluorine NMR methodology to become a mainstay methodology. Sort of, we became famous for doing heteronuclear, multidimensional NMR and doing three-dimensional structures of proteins. But the fluorine has been this slightly neglected nucleus, despite the fact that it has really powerful properties. And in the same way as C13 and N15 labeling became, it's common now, everybody does it. I would like to see more of the fluorine in that field and then exploit it for very big complexes. And also what we can use it for, not only look at structural questions, but also their dynamics questions, because this is really where things are. It's not a static picture what goes on in biology. It's a fluent, it's a choreographed play, and this is what we need to try to get at. And then personally, what I'm developing right now is using in-cell fluorine NMR, because we want to look at a protein when it does its job, when it's in the cell. And using the traditional techniques, we cannot do that because there are too many hydrogens, too many carbons around. So it's the sea of nuclei, and to find the needle in the haystack of what you want to look at is almost impossible. But if I can bring a fluorinated protein into the cell and then look at how it behaves in the cell, then I have a chance to do that by NMR. And this is where, at the moment, my group is pushing the development.
And how do you see the future of your field?
As everybody says, it's very hard to predict the future, right? So
yes, it is.
I have total confidence that when young people go into science and get passionate about using their skills to solve problems, we will make big, big steps forward. And it's not so much me anymore. What I can do is I can sit on the sidelines and cheer them on. And yes, go for a crazy problem. And if everybody says, oh, this is impossible to do, I would always encourage them, no, try to do the impossible. Because if you tackle problems that are nearly impossible to solve, that's when you get big, big steps forward. And I really believe that young people being adventurous, being daring, going into science, they will move us forward.
Okay. Changing gears a little bit, why did you become a scientist?
That's a very interesting question. I would have been either an artist or a scientist. And at some stage, I decided I wasn't good enough to be an artist. So, but even in school, I loved science. I was convinced I would be a mathematician till I got my A levels. But then the principal of the high school and my father told me it would be very hard as a woman to earn a living as a mathematician. I should rethink. And that threw me off for a few months. And then I decided physics and chemistry are close enough, and I'll do that.
Was that? You were talking about your experience. I saw on your website welcome page that statement saying, I will read, in this lab, we accept as true, then Black Lives Matter, immigrants are welcome, science is real, feminism is for everyone, love's love, and magnets are cool. I would like to ask you, do you think that the scientific community is doing enough to fight racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia?
I have to tell you a blank no, they're not doing enough. And I'm a very outspoken person. I'm also politically engaged, and I've always been a revolutionary. So I think that we as scientists have an obligation to engage with the world and make our political opinions known and try to educate everybody. And at least what I see in the US, it is the lack of education and the disregard of some people that education is a good, that is a universal good for society, not just for an individual person, that dismays me. And I very much believe that if we want to move society forward, we have to educate the general public about what does it mean to use the scientific method to look at facts. What are the data out there? How do you analyze data and make your own opinions based on those facts, rather than blindly following sometimes preconceived ideas. And I wish I would be better at communicating to the public. I'm trying to do this in some little way, but I think we should have at scientific institutions, universities, we should have a concerted effort to really engage with the public, educate the public, and put our service, because we've been educated and we got the education. I got a free education in Europe. We should use that to further society wherever we are.
Okay. How important was it for you to participate in the 20th IUPAB Congress in Brazil, though virtually?
I really think that it is important to have these big congresses in different parts of the world, because again, science is not enclosed by boundaries of countries, continents. It's a world enterprise. And I think to bring big congresses like the IUPAB meeting to Brazil, and it was going to be in the heart of South America at the confluence of Argentina and Brazil, is really important, because again, this is the way for young people to see that science is exciting, science is fun, and maybe that scientists are also people who are interesting and can engage.
Yeah, they could be artists.
Yep.
So what would be your advice for a young scientist?
What I tell everybody when I see students who come and interview, or also people who want to join my group, I am absolutely convinced that if you love doing something, you will be good at it. So don't do science because you think it's a job. You really want to live, breathe science. This is what defines you. And if this is at your heart, you will be a great scientist. And you have to ask yourself that question very seriously, because if you're not that passionate, you'll become very soon disappointed. 99% of everything we do fails. Scientists are probably the most resilient people around, because we constantly try something and it fails. And we live for this tiny moment where suddenly we find something unusual and it gets us excited. And if you have that in your personality, yes, then you can be a scientist and go for it. And it's the same with artists. I also tell my students, there are only two professions in the world where you get paid for doing your hobby. Oh, no, wait, yes, the artists and the scientists. And we get paid royally compared to the artists. So think about that. You can really do what you want and you earn a salary. It is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
The intellectual freedom as a scientist is certainly something that one cannot underestimate. It really makes for a fantastic life to have that intellectual freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to talk
It was
to you.
a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope if any of the students see this interview, just remember, if you love doing something, you'll be good at it. Just go for it.